Tonight's meeting will be conducted through hybrid in-person online meeting platform. Should an individual planning commission become unexpectedly disconnected, please join the meeting at your first opportunity. Record reflect your attendance. Meeting will pause up 10 minutes to address technical difficulties. If it can't be resolved 10 minutes, then the meeting proceeds so long as a quorum of planning commissioners are present. Please mute the phone when not speaking. To those in attendance, please remember to speak into microphone addressing staff or public comments / testimonies.
Planning staff, please call roll on whether or not we got four.
Mike Ross,
Here.
Mike Vincent,
Here.
Leighton Lowe, Melinda Didier, Peter Harpster,
Here.
Manny Gutierrez, Stacy Knifton.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Will staff in attendance please introduce yourselves?
Derek Broughton, Director of Planning and Building for Franklin County.
Brian Nelson, Planner 1.
Aaron Gutterson, Planner 2.
We also have in attendance our planning consultant, Nicole Stickney. She'll be doing the presentation on the Title 17.
I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. So moved.
A second, yes.
I would move that we approve the agenda for the minutes from the last meeting.
Second. Jason, it's been moved by. It's been. Oh, okay. Second.
Then who
It's been
seconded?
moved by Stacy Knifton and seconded by Commissioner Vincent. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the October 30th, 2023 meeting.
October 3rd,
October
30th.
3rd.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes for the October 3rd meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Vincent, seconded by Commissioner Harpster. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item one. Item one is a kickoff presentation for the Title 17 zoning revision process. The revision is to bring Title 17 zoning into greater compliance with the 2018-2038 Franklin County Comprehensive Plan and state law. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name for the record is Nicole Stickney. I'm Planning Project Manager with AHBL. We have offices here in Pasco. We've been assisting the county since back to 2016, 2017 in various capacities, and always appreciate the opportunity to be of assistance. We help with long-range projects such as this one, code revisions, as well as permitting when you need help on those items as well. So we're pretty familiar with Franklin County, and we also helped with the last comprehensive plan update. What we're here for tonight is proposed amendments to Title 17, which is your zoning code. As you'll remember, you recently recommended to adopt changes to Title 16, your subdivision code. Those go together as your development regulations, which implement your comprehensive plan. Title 17 is really due for some revisions and a tune-up. It's been a while since many revisions have been made. There's a lot of things in there that are outdated or rather archaic. And so we're looking at those items as well as things to comply with law. Let me go into a little more detail about our approach here. So we did find that updates to Title 17 zoning are needed to first ensure consistency across jurisdictions. So when we began this effort, we really wanted to endeavor to make sure that there was compatibility where possible with development that's occurring within the urban growth areas. So for that we're just looking at those particular zones that are assigned in those areas where the city of Pasco and maybe some of the other cities are expected to grow, and we want to make sure that there is not going to be a sort of concern or an issue if lands are later annexed into those cities where maybe the development regulations are no longer applicable, or maybe even counter to what's going to be happening in the future with development. Next, and probably the biggest focal point here is compliance with the Growth Management Act. So when the county adopted updates to the comprehensive plan a few years back, that was part of the periodic update review schedule, and it was a requirement. And along with that requirement came the need to look back at your development regulations. And so this has been long coming in terms of trying to make sure that we are addressing all of those requirements. I do want to emphasize that there will be additional requirements for more changes down the road. We're not trying to bring everything into compliance at this point, but rather look back to what was required during the last periodic update, get all of those different things, because it is pretty expansive, taken care of. And then in a few years' time, you'll be looking at this once again for anything new, but hopefully it'll be a much easier effort at that point. And then finally, we also wanted to clean up and modernize your existing code. As I mentioned, there's a lot of things in there that just kind of out of date. So we wanted to identify those and provide some proposals to you. Quickly, just to give you an overview of the proposed changes, Title 17, as I mentioned, is your zoning code. So that's where you're going to find different sections that identify the uses, the development standards, bulk dimensional requirements for buildings, and so forth among all of your different zoning districts. You have an array of zoning districts for different uses and different purposes. There's also a lot of different sections as you move on that address things such as specialty topics. And that could be something like what you'd find in your supplemental development and use regulations, things like accessory dwelling units. Those are a hot topic right now. Or things like planned unit developments. We also have specific sections about things like home occupations, landscaping, and so forth. So that's just to give you kind of an overview of how Title 17 is organized. There is a lot in there. Your zoning regulations are pretty expansive, and a lot is addressed. What you don't find in Title 17, as you might remember, is your subdivision regulations. So anything with division of land is not talked about here. It's talked about in a different part of the code. And likewise, your administrative codes about how you process permits, things like that, that is also in a different title. So you need to remember that those are organized outside of Title 17, but many times they do need to work in concert with one another. I'll go over some of the regulatory changes that have brought some of these proposed changes into focus, and I'll talk about some process improvements along the way and some of these other details. I'm going to try to move fairly quickly through this just to give you a really good overview. It is a big packet. There is a lot to read with all of these different edits, these strikeouts, additions, and so forth. But really what we're trying to do is boil it down so that you know what the key ideas are, and really what has implications for folks that want to do projects in Franklin County. Because that's really what you want to know is what you're approving. Is this going to be better for the county? Is it going to be better for developers? Is it going to make things harder? So we're going to try to really keep it at that high level for you. And please interrupt me as I go along in case you have questions, because I do want to really make this an opportunity for you to have this information distilled along the way.
And just understand, this is the kickoff. It's not like we're going to be expecting you guys to approve this next week or next month, or even, don't be surprised if we don't bring this. What I'm hoping after Nicole does her presentation and everything regarding this is that you all will take this home. You will look through it. You will bring back at our next meeting questions or things that you want workshopped or better explained. Then staff will put together a calendar to address those questions through whether it's just bringing you back information or holding workshops or whatever. This is going to be a collaborative process with the planning commission. This is the kickoff. So just know that we're just starting this,
This is it. This is the whole packet. There's not another packet.
not at this point.
So later on, we could write some more like analysis and we'll have more process information. This is everything we've worked on thus far.
That will,
There's more, this is half of 17.
no, this
This is
is
it.
all of 17.
Okay.
So what's going on is you have what I call the big lift. That's like just getting this thing into the 21st century. That's an exaggeration. Last time our code was updated like this was in 08. That's 15 years ago. A little bit's changed since then. So this is kind of bringing it up just to really 2018 standards. Now, since 2018, the state's gone and done a bunch of new interesting things regarding ADUs and various other stuff that is still being worked out. Those things will come later. Don't worry about them now. Like ADUs, we may break that back open after we get this basic stuff set, and go into like fine detail on it right now. But right now, we're just this bulk part. But I've been here for 5 years. I'm 3 years behind on my zoning updates and things like that, my code changes. That's my schedule, nobody else's. In my brain, I'm 3 years behind. So we need to get this going, but this body will be doing a lot more workshops and be starting to see a lot more code modifications and changes coming, because it's a perpetual process that really has not been done in the county the way it should be. And that's where you're constantly looking at your codes, you're updating them, you're modifying, or you're saying, no, we're going to keep it this way because we don't want that thing to start happening here. I mean, whatever, but it's a living document. And frankly, the thing ain't moved for 15 years. There's been little tweaks here, little tweaks there, but they've always been specific to a situation. The last, quote, big update, I would say, would involve the slopes of Bruce.
Yeah.
And I think that was in 15, 16, something like that. So I just wanted to put that out there as you're listening to her presentation. Just be advised that we're not looking for you or expecting you to have this memorized tonight. This is the first draft. And then we as a group will start putting together what we're going to take to the board.
And I do want to emphasize that we've done a lot of work to get it to this
Oh.
point. It's gone under a lot of review. At AHBL, one of the things that we're able to do, we help develop policy, we help develop codes, but we also implement them. We'll work in different jurisdictions on behalf of developers and things like that. So we sort of see things from both sides of the counter. And I think that makes that gives us a really good perspective. So we understand from the applicant's view what the code looks like, but also from the staff's view what the code looks like. And so we're trying to be very discerning and for both of those situations. That doesn't mean that you as a planning commission won't have a different perspective altogether, but I want to emphasize that we've all gone through this pretty carefully. Derek's gone through this. So we're not bringing to you a first cut. We're bringing something to you we think is pretty good. But it's now at this process. It's up to the planning commission to make that determination if you want to recommend it, or if you have changes you'd like to see. And then, of course, bring it into the public for their review as well. We're going to be going through SEPA environmental review. We've got a lot of steps along the way. Okay. The other thing I want to emphasize is that we did write for you a summary of the proposed changes. So this is where, and it's in chronological order, it matches the order of the code, I should say. We just bulleted out what we did because it's one thing to read code. You'll fall asleep, I would imagine, reading a lot of it. This is where we distilled it down to just kind of the real basics. It's still several pages long because there is so many changes. But here you get the 6-page clip note summary. So wanted to also emphasize that that's in your packet. Okay, so I'll go now through some of these concepts. So I'll begin with accessory dwelling units. And on my slides here, I have listed the section number off to the side, the right-hand side, so you know exactly what section I'm talking to. But then the important speaking points that I'll get at are in this middle area. And hopefully that's big enough you can read it or make it out somewhat. When we look at the accessory dwelling unit requirements, those are in chapter 17.66, which is called supplemental developmental and use regulations. That chapter is really pretty big and there's all these different sections in it. Here's what I want to tell you what we did for ADUs. There are two different sections already existing, one about attached ADUs, the other one about detached ADUs. Here's what we've done. For right now, we've proposed to remove the requirement that one dwelling must be owner occupied for 8 months. Just getting rid of that. Also removing the prohibition of renting of rooms. Why would we do that? Well, the idea is statewide, there's a housing crisis. And in the past, people have been kind of concerned about ADUs, like, oh, we need to make sure that these aren't, people just coming in and leaving and all this kind of stuff. But actually now that it's looked in a different view, it's kind of like, why do we need all this regulatory red tape? Who really knows if it's owner occupied? Who's going to regulate that? So the idea now is to just kind of take off that extra stuff. As we've written, these are unnecessary requirements and they would be problematic to regulate. Also, just so you know, in the 2021 legislative session, the state legislature specified that cities and counties cannot impose or enforce an owner occupancy requirement on any housing unit on a lot that contains an ADU. So that's the whole concept behind that. Moving on to the detached ADUs, we have added that one detached ADU is permitted in all AP 20 and AP 40 zones that have already a permanent site-built house. And in the other residential zones, if criteria are met, a conditional use permit could be approved. But we also removed the condition that the ADU should only be used to care for aged or disabled relatives. So that's on the books presently. Moving forward, we'd like to have that out of the code. By removing that barrier, we're adding flexibility and we're lessening restrictions on the private property owners. So that's kind of the summary there pertaining to ADUs. Planned unit developments. That is an earlier section. It's chapter 17.58, and that is called Planned Unit Development and Master Plan Resorts. We're actually adding this and master planned resorts to it. That's something that's defined under the RCWs, and just having a citation or a linkage to that would be important. I don't know if you'd ever see that in Franklin County, but we wanted to have a reference to it so that it wouldn't go unsaid. But what's important here is that we've made some additions, which include references to the requirements that are contained in the RCWs. And then we've also added some design and development standards that are based on your comprehensive plan, which would include open space requirements, buffers, cluster development, and low impact site design. So the new code that we're proposing is in alignment with RCWs and also implements the county's comprehensive plan. Quick note on this one, you actually have a separate application that you're processing relating to planned unit developments. Our proposed changes were developed before that application came in, so we're going to just kind of monitor and see how that turns out as you're processing it. Do I have that right, Derek? It's kind of in the works still.
Actually, it went to the board.
It went to the board, okay.
However, staff is still recommending
Okay.
to go along those lines.
So if that gets changed in the meantime, we'll make sure that we're showing that when we get to a final version and ordinance.
Yeah, but yeah, right now basically the next touch will be through this process.
Okay. Next topic that I have for you at this time is electric vehicle infrastructure. That's under that same supplemental development use regulations. The section is 17.66.115. This is a proposed new section. It's to address state legal requirements. Electric vehicle infrastructure is required to be allowed in certain zoning districts. There's some exceptions that are listed in the RCWs. So we've added this proposed new section, which would contain the design and placement requirements for implementation of this new infrastructure requirement. Just so you know, the state law does require the county to allow these uses as a primary permitted use in all non-residentially zoned areas. Doesn't mean it has to be there. It means you can't prohibit it, right? And the county may want to instead just say they're allowed in all zoning districts. You could do that if you want to. So include residential. If you did that, our suggested language would be to say installation of vehicle charging stations on single-family residential sites shall meet the manufacturing installation requirements of the IBC, which is the International Building Code, and the NEC, which is the National Electrical Code, just to cover that. So the idea is that, so if somebody had a use and they wanted to put charging stations in so that when people come to the brewery out in the county and they wanted to charge up their cars while they're there, yeah, then it would be clear in the zoning code that it's an allowed use to have that. Just for an example. Public facilities comes next. 1766-112. That's a little bit earlier in the code. We have added this proposed new section. It's titled Essential Public Facilities. This is the requirement for the RCWs. I have the citation in the summary here. And this section establishes application requirements, criteria for review, and citing requirements to protect the public interest. Just to go a little deeper, to give you some more information about it. Essential public facilities, there's a whole kind of range of them, but the idea is that these are the things that are really difficult to cite because a lot of communities would be like, we don't want that here, like a correctional facility or an airport that's going to have a lot of activity. Those are some examples of things that are typically hard to cite. These have area-wide impacts, and so what we're doing is we're just proposing a way that these types of things would be analyzed and considered. It basically is pretty deferential to the county, saying that there needs to be a demonstrated need for a facility for the community at large, and it should not be contrary to the public interest. And we've also put in our proposed code that the essential public facility or special property shall be consistent with the goals and policies of your comprehensive plan. So basically, any applicant, say if it's the state or another, or an agency of the state that wants to put something here that meets this definition, they would have to go and show how they are being consistent with your requirements and or that they could mitigate for those types of things. I'm going to give you another example. Maybe they'd have to do enhanced landscaping or screening or setbacks because their use would be bothersome to some folks. They'd have to do some mitigation for it. That's kind of the general concept here with the essential public facilities. And again, we need to have citing requirements added to the code because it's part of the state rules and state laws. So I don't know if this code would be used much, but it does need to be addressed in your code. Okay, going to a easier topic now, outdoor lighting. Right now, your code has a section on outdoor lighting that applies to residential districts. We really think that should be broadened. We should have outdoor lighting regulations for all of your districts. One good reason to do this is to maintain those dark sky standards and ask folks to direct their light downward. Light trespass can be a real nuisance. It also can impact just enjoyment of people's private property when there's light glare from adjacent properties. So we're just looking at some best practices here. Nothing too earth shattering, but as I mentioned, it's just the idea of expanding those regulations so that when the county staff get an application in for a permit, they can look at the outdoor lighting that's proposed for a commercial property and say, you know, this isn't going to work, or you need to make a couple changes. Right now, they would have a limited ability unless it's in a residential area. These are really kind of minimal changes, but the idea is that we would, like I said, expand it so it wouldn't be just residential. And then one other point I wanted to make here, we've added a proposed sentence that says the use of flashing strobes viewable by the public is prohibited unless a requirement for the purposes of public safety. Again, I think pretty appropriate for unincorporated Franklin County. But please do take a close look at that and let us know your feedback. Next, setbacks for pools and hot tubs. So we've got a lot of residential swimming pools that go in the county. We've incorporated a recent change that's gone through your code regarding the barrier height. We have also renamed the section to specify that this code would apply to residential uses and locations. And we've reorganized the section to be more clear. We've also added a requirement that hot tubs need to be located at least 1 foot from a utility easement. Pretty straightforward there. I'm going to turn to it real quick just to see if I have anything else to share on that topic. Oh, and we still have the line that says a use of a pool cover does not eliminate or replace a requirement for fencing, which is something that we've vetted with the building code folks and talked about that. So as I mentioned, we did incorporate those changes that went through the board. They adopted the ordinance in 2023, changing the pool barrier height. So we're making sure we're in alignment with those recent changes as we go forward. Okay, pawn stores, secondhand shops. I don't know if this will be a big deal to anything, but we've singled this one out. It's on my slides. So the idea here is that we're removing the section. That's why we put it on a slide. We wanted to make it real obvious. We're removing the section about pawn shops and secondhand shops because before, I don't know, maybe people were spooked by it. They thought it needed to have all these extra requirements and details, but we think these should just be treated like any other retail. So we just didn't want to have it singled out. So we are recommending a repeal of 1766-170 pawn shops and secondhand shops. Just treat them like any other store going forward is the idea. Next, kind of a housekeeping item, the zoning map. It's referenced in your code, and it's just kind of an old way of referencing things. We're using GIS these days, so it's just being very clear that the county maintains geographic information systems through the computer. It's not all just a hand-drawn map or colored-in map, so we're just changing the reference to that. Let me just be a little more
That helps
specific on
maintain
that.
Consistency. As we make changes to our zoning map, GIS updates it. However, a hard copy map created as code and set, technically, you have to actually update that every time, which means you have to break open your zoning code. This is a much better reference and system for us to be able to use because we can always print off the most up-to-date map.
And it's, it's meant to be more user-friendly and accessible to the public as well. I want to emphasize that it says the zoning data set should be integrated into Franklin County's web-based mapping system for viewing by the general public and be made available either digitally or physically by staff at the planning and building department for those who don't have computer or internet access, right? So it's providing it to folks in different ways. So again, just kind of more of a housekeeping modernization step here. Okay, next topic that I have for you is factory assembled homes. So that means modular homes or manufactured homes. We've added them as permitted uses outright in zones R1, R3, RS1 to allow for more housing options. This is requiring that site-built and factory assembled homes in those rural residential and rural settlement areas It does specify they would need to be built on poured concrete or on masonry block foundations. And they still need to meet the same standard as site-built homes in terms of other regulations and such. Just see if I have anything else to share with you on that, because I don't want to breeze by it if there's something I should call out. Oh yeah, we have one other stipulation. It says all dwellings must be positively connected to foundations, meeting seismic and wind loading standards for Franklin County, Washington. So it's kind of typical language. Whoops, I think I went backwards there. Okay, number 10, non-conforming uses and catastrophic events. This is the question of what if a house burns down? Can it be rebuilt if it was no longer allowed in the zoning district? That's just one example. It's really for any use that's grandfathered. That's what we mean by non-conforming. So this section is called maintenance, damage, repairs, and restoration. That's section 1770.050, and that's nested within the chapter 1770, which is non-conforming uses. We have added a provision that in the event of a catastrophic event, fire, flood, what have you, non-conforming uses must obtain a permit within 6 months, and all repairs shall be completed within 12 months, or those non-conforming privileges are lost. This is typically found in codes we find that are that apply to legal non-conforming uses. Since the non-conforming use is no longer permitted in that zone, if it's not constructed within a reasonable time frame, the lot should be utilized to meet current adopted standards. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what the specific change is there. Previously, we didn't have a time frame listed out. And so that's the idea, is to be specific about that. So that's the add. We did also propose to strike the statement that said the proposed repair reconstruction must duplicate the original building footprint. There's probably some good reasons to not actually require that. If somebody wants to change up their floor plan, or they're using more modern building methods, there could be lots of scenarios there where if somebody was held to the original building permit, they might actually, building footprint, excuse me, they might actually be disadvantaged. So we said, why do we have that? We don't really need that. Let's strike that. So we've deleted that, proposed to delete that in both instances.
I thought it said something about 50% of damage and you can't do it. Where'd it go?
Yeah, so what it already says,
Stricken.
what's that?
If I have a flood that wipes out my house,
Mhm.
that's more than 50% of damage. I think we still need to have a right to rebuild. This thing of 50% damage and then you have no chance. No, that did cover. Anyway, we'll talk about that later, but.
Okay.
I was a little shocked when I saw that. And I
Mhm.
frankly find it a little ruthless.
Hmm.
I've got a house that's now, my family's been there for whatever amount of time. Zoning around me's changed. Catastrophic event occurs. More than 50% of my house is damaged. Under our current code. Sorry,
If it's been rezoned.
Permit that for rebuild then, right?
currently, what I want is this. And I want that 50% damage thing removed. Because nowadays, it's too easy to hit 50% valuation of damage.
Fortunately, I don't think this is going to come up a whole lot in Franklin County, and I'll tell you why.
Better not after our resiliency stuff is done.
How complicated is it to get on a 12-month duration of the rebuild on it?
We will always work with people that are working on the projects. The key is to get the permit and be doing something within that amount of time.
So
Things
people have to
happen.
wait on insurance or
Right.
circumstances. What I was going to tell you though is that I've seen a lot of cities where they'll have, say, a downtown area, and maybe they're saying, oh, this should be commercial now. we have a vision. We want this to be commercial in the future. So they change the zoning to commercial. They say, okay, if you already had a house there, now you're legal non-conforming and you can stay there. But if something happens, this is where that scenario comes in. I don't see a lot of redevelopment or a lot of rezoning that's creating nonconformities in the first place. This only is important if all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but if we have a situation where there's a use that no longer conforms to the zoning there. So that change would have to be made. So pretty far and few in between, but it does happen. We do need to have provisions for it. I just didn't want you to think it was any scenario when something bad happens to a structure. Usually that structure is,
This is more of a city problem usually than a
Yep.
rural problem, because our rural zoning concepts don't change a lot. However, in the Lamberts, it could become an issue, and or something changes, like currently land's ag and then it turns I2. Well, now all of a sudden residential's a non-conforming use. In the I2, but that house would still be protected. But again, we'll be going through this stuff some more.
yeah. And one more fine point on that. I'm kind of generalizing here about uses, but there can also be nonconformities due to bulk dimensional standards. So maybe my good example there would be if somebody was on a shoreline area or a view area, let's say a view area, and their building was super tall, something happened to it, and come to find out, well, the zoning code doesn't allow you to build as tall as your building was when you built it 40 years ago or whatever. That's a nonconformity. So that's another scenario where we'd be looking at this code if zoning code had actually changed. Again, it's a what if scenario. Okay, enough on that. Let's move on to design standards in xeriscaping. This is in 1774-050. So we looked quite a bit at the landscaping standards. We didn't want to beef them up to be anything that really isn't appropriate for Franklin County. So you have pretty, I think, lenient standards is how I would describe them. But we could be a little bit better about being inclusive and specifying some kind of alternative choices that are available. So something that we've added is that xeriscaping is a landscape design technique that minimizes water consumption by using some or all of the following techniques. And then we list a couple different things about that. The idea being that in the county, we're not going to require everybody to have a turf lawn and maintain it and that sort of thing. Instead, they could do different things and have these different options. So this is really, in my view, just kind of a benefit of broadening what's allowed and being very specific about it.
Yeah, I would, because we don't, if somebody came in with a xeriscape concept, I mean, you see it all over the place. People just got rock front yards and stuff like that. It's never been prohibited that I'm aware of, except for maybe under CC&Rs and stuff. That's not our purview.
Yeah.
However, by calling it out, lots of folks have never even heard of the concept xeriscape. They see it, but they don't know if that's what it's called. So this helps also let them know that they have that option.
And we are in Eastern Washington. We do have limited water resources. There's some areas where people are on irrigation water. There's areas where people are not on irrigation water. So we wanted to kind of recognize that and recognize that drought periods do occur here. Okay, kind of in that same theme, there is a list of recommended trees. Now, the keyword being recommended, it's not a requirement, but we thought it would be advantageous to have just kind of a formal adoption, or for maybe people who are new to the area or unfamiliar. Maybe there's a landscape architect that's been hired on from Western Washington and they just don't know what happens here, what grows well here. So the idea is just to have some best practices and kind of provide some help in the code to point to what those recommended trees would be. Again, recommended. So it's just kind of a helpful, it's not a footnote in the code, but that's kind of the way I would view it. It's just some additional information, because as you know, the code is, we don't use the word recommended too much. It's supposed to be requirements. the other thing is we've added a few more details in here. One is that fruit growers, anybody that's growing like apples or cherries, says they shall control pests that may be a potential source of infestation for orchards in Franklin County. That's kind of a standard requirement, but it's not in your code. So we wanted to call that out, that people need to be responsible when they're going to be planting those types of vegetation. Now there is a section in the code already that says all planting areas need to be irrigated if applicable. We've added a little bit more to it. We've added that irrigation water should not be allowed to pool or collect on public rights of way. And xeriscape landscaping, use of drought tolerant native vegetation is encouraged. Any plant material that projects into public rights of way shall be maintained as follows. And then we have some specifics about trees that overhang. Again, there's going to be few and far areas in the county where that's really super important. Really, it's about the edge of people's property if it's on a public rights of way, but we've added that in as well. So just some good measures here to kind of bolster what you already have for landscaping. Next, we've proposed to rename a zone. So right now you have a zone, it's called C2. It can be really confusing because this is not a commercial, let me see. Make sure I get it right, 1746. Yeah, it's a rural community, commercial zone. We didn't want it to be confused with Pasco's C2 zoning district, which is a completely different zone. So a lot of times we try to name, or at least they have in the past, named these to be sort of analogous, just to kind of reference what's on the county side, what's on the city side that are kind of similar. They don't have to match, but they're similar. It's a lot less confusing if we can rename this C2 zone to be RC-2. And likewise, we're proposing to rename the general industrial zone to the medium industrial zone. That's because we have a light industrial zone, we have a heavy industrial zone. Why do we have a general zone? Let's call it medium. Just trying to make things better along the way. Also, just to let you know, Pasco's code has a similar district called I2 Medium Industrial District. So just for ease and simplicity, that's the other reason to make that little change. Right to farm disclosure and notification. So you already have a section in Franklin County Code, which is called right to farm. And we've talked about that quite a bit, and we've incorporated it now into your comprehensive plan. That's one of the things we took care of in this last update. I remember that well. Right now, that is codified at chapter 5.12. So it's not in the zoning title. It's somewhere else in Franklin County Code. We've recommended a few changes, some tweaks to it. And then we're recommending to bring it into the zoning code. Why would we bring it into the zoning code? Well, a couple of different reasons. One, so that it gets noticed. You know, if somebody's working on a project, they're looking at the development code. They're not looking at all these other titles necessarily. So this is kind of a best practice. The other reason is we want it to be applied. So it is a serious thing to include a notification and disclosure for a lot of projects, which is required by the RCWs to let people know that farming activities do happen in Franklin County. And they were here first, basically, and you can't come out and complain that there's a nuisance. Like, yeah, you bought a house and it's next to a field and they fly over the field. You know, things like that happen, or they spray the fields. You can't call up and be like, well, I don't want them doing that anymore because I live here now. That's the whole idea. It's to protect farming and protect the local industry in Franklin County and be very clear about that. So that's the idea of bringing it into the zoning code. So again, I think that's just a good thing we're looking to do here. Again, I'm going to turn to it just to see if there's any last little detail before I move on. And this kind of just gives you a flavor too of the things we were looking at. We were looking at, well, what works? How is this structured? How is this organized? What could be overlooked or missed? You know, I kind of get paranoid and think about these things and, well, let's put this in the zoning code. So it is the exact same language except for some small changes. I've taken out forest practices and timber production because we can strike that language. That doesn't really fit in. And yeah, pretty much taking out the terms about forest practice and timber. And then just citations get updated. Now, right here, I said this is about notification and disclosure. That's a lot of blue ink. That's a lot of things that we're recommending to add. And here's why. The county's required to have regulations that require a notice on development permits and plats within 500 feet of designated natural resource lands or where commercial activities occur. So I've given you the citation from the RCWs, but basically what it says is if you have a short plat or you're doing a long plat and you're you're proximate to a farm, you actually need to record it on the face of your plat. A statement that says there's a Right to Farm Act in Franklin County. It says if the property you're purchasing is located near an agricultural land, you may be subject to inconveniences arising from some operations, may include but are not limited to noise, odors, fumes, dust, smoke, stuff I was just describing. So basically fair game for everybody to know about these things, right? That's the idea. All right, that's the end of my slides. There's just a few more things to call out. We did key up some definitions. So please, I know it's tempting to kind of like just gloss over definitions, but definitions are actually super important to zoning code. So please look at those changes that we've proposed. And we've made comments in the document itself, but also on the summary sheet. So you can kind of cross-reference and see where that stuff's happening. We've added a specific call out that there are 2 overlay zones in Franklin County. They're kind of talked about in a roundabout way in the zoning code. We just want to be very explicit. So what are the overlay zones? The first one is agricultural resource lands. That's the agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance. We know that's a big deal. We need to have those defined. And then secondly, there's an overlay for the airport. So the airport overlay is in addition to the zoning. And throughout it, we've added references to it. So it really shouldn't be missed. Oh, another thing, there was a very long table and it's super hard to read online because of the way that the codifier put it together. And the table's helpful because it shows the different zoning districts and the different uses. And one thing I'll say is that we were really careful to make sure that the table and the text work together. And so we had to go back and
Because
forth.
it doesn't right now.
Yeah, because we don't want it to be inconsistent. And then, you have to think, okay, does the table have precedence over the text or vice versa? And we don't want that madness. We just want it to be consistent. So we've looked at striking out the old table. It's also hard to find. That was a trick for me when I first came on the scene in Franklin County. I didn't even know the table was there for a little while. It's hidden. So we're putting it so it's more prominent, and we're also breaking it into several tables so it's more legible, because you don't need to put them all in one table. We can have a separate table for residential, commercial, industrial, and so forth. So that's an improvement. There's kind of some other minor things, so I won't belabor the points on that. We added just a little quick note about mineral extraction, because that's in the comprehensive plan, and we want to make sure anything that's kind of in the comprehensive plan that should also be highlighted in the code is there. And, oh, you know how I was talking about relocating the Right to Farm Act stuff? We also want to relocate hazardous waste. So hazardous waste is already in Franklin County Code. It's at 8.08. Let's put it in your zoning code. And let's also update the references to the RCWs, because the state did recodify that stuff. We found that. This code does relate to land use, and therefore it should be included in the zoning title. Again, we want it to be easy to find and easy to implement. And that's what I have for you tonight. So thank you for your time listening to me. Here's some next steps. This is squishy right now, but this is what you can expect down the road. At some point, when we've got the document, maybe retooled with some changes here and there, or maybe we're pretty close. And there won't be a ton of changes, but once it's ready for public view, it'll be time for a SEPA determination. So that's the State Environmental Policy Act, and that's where the county will go out and basically notice the public and agencies about the environmental impacts of the proposal, and we'll go through that. There will be a comment period. We will also be sending these proposed changes in due time to the Department of Commerce. I want to emphasize that when it goes to that agency, they then distro it out to other agencies. So it gives an opportunity for it to be on the radar of DOT and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and Ecology and all these different agencies. And they can be like, oh yeah, we're going to look at something here and we're going to go bug Derek about it and make a comment. Or sometimes they applaud us. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But it does put the state agencies on notice about this. We'll do second, third, however many planning commission workshops. And it's a little out of order, but those will come in due time as well. Eventually, once these things are taken care of, we get to a public hearing. We can hear from the public. I want to remind you, this is a legislative item, so don't feel like you can't talk about it in the meantime. And this is all on the record. It's all open for discussion at any point. It doesn't need to wait for the public hearing. And then eventually the Board of County Commissioners, they might hold their own public hearing, but the idea is they'll use the record here from this planning commission review, and eventually they would be the decision makers on passing an ordinance to make any changes that are proposed.
You got the big one for me.
Okay.
This is, remember, so 2 things I asked from the planning commission, look this over, bring back questions for next month. Second thing, talk to your friends, let them know what's going on. This is not quasi judicial. You're allowed to talk, get feedback. That's the side of your mission as a planning commissioner that we don't discuss much because unfortunately the opportunities don't arise much, but there will be more of them. So talk to your friends, talk to your whoever. Because again, this is a public document. It's legislative. It's not bound by any of the quasi judicial one-touch stuff.
Yeah, you're not making a permit recommendation or anything like that, so. It's cool.
Did you all have any questions of Nicole or myself? Okay,
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you again.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Item number 2 is a review and adopt approval of the alternative findings of facts generated by staff as directed by the Planning Commission during the October 3rd, 2023 meeting of the CPA docket. May we have staff present the alternative findings of fact, please?
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, did y'all have a chance to read these? Okay. So this will be the planning commission's recommendation. This is moving forward. However, please be advised, staff will be submitting, so it will be a split recommendation. We will not be using the same recommendation you are. The board will see your recommendation. The board will see our recommendation. This happens occasionally. As you know, the planning commission is an independent body, and the planning commission is not always going to agree with staff's recommendation on certain items. The planning or the staff will submit a split or an alternative recommendation to the board. The board will make the decision on the matter. So the proposals, what we did was took the testimony and information that was provided us at the hearing, comments that were made by the planning commissions, questions that were asked, those types of things. And then staff was able to put together recommendations that we think are in line with the position that the planning commission took. So we can either go over these, but if you're comfortable with them, you can also vote on them. It's up to y'all. I will read them into the record though. I mean, this document is part of the record. but, effectively, the proposal is in accord with the goals, policies of the comprehensive plan, including the countywide planning policies based on supporting comment. Franklin County Comprehensive Plan states as one of the policies governing rural residential areas is provide for the orderly transition between urban and agricultural land uses. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant's position that Clark Road should be the natural divider between agricultural and residential. One of the countywide planning policies encourages the availability of affordable housing to all economic segments of the Franklin County population. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant's position that allowing residential development to occur could lead to an increase in affordable housing due to the general increase of available housing stock. The effect of the proposal on the immediate vicinity will not be material or detrimental to the land use that is the basis of the comprehensive plan or zoning designation. One of the policies for the rural residential comprehensive plan land use designation calls for the orderly transition between urban and agricultural land uses. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that changing the comprehensive plan land use designation to rural residential will provide for a clean break between the residential and agricultural areas at Clark Road. Changing the comprehensive plan land use designation to rural residential would meet parts of the purpose statement for the rural residential RR1 zoning district in that it would provide a buffer area between urban and suburban areas and those reserved for the continued agricultural production to lessen the potential conflicts between development and agriculture. In addition, it would provide an opportunity for rural residents living close enough to cities and towns to permit commuting to work and in a manner that will not conflict with the active agricultural production. The proposed amendment will not result in probable significant adverse impacts to the transportation network, capital facilities, utilities, parks, and environmental features which cannot be mitigated and will not place uncompensated burdens upon existing or planned services. Both the city of Pasco's 2022 Transportation Master Plan and BF Benton Franklin Council of Governments Transition 2045 have planned transportation improvement projects designated within the next coming years. Those transportation projects are not projected to occur for at least 7 years and could negatively affect said planned projects depending on development layout. In other words, depending on timing of project development and correlation with the project, depending on, so the plans call for this stuff to occur within 7 years. These could conflict with each other, but that's going to be up to the folks to, as it's being laid out, to make sure that it doesn't occur. There are no planned projects listed in the 2018 Franklin County Comprehensive Plan or in the 2022 to 2027 TIP within the area. Franklin County Public Works and their agency comments concluded the redesignation could have an effect on the county's road system. So what this is trying to say is, yeah, there's a bunch of plans, there's a lot of ideas, but the reality is nothing is in the ground yet. And so it may or may not happen. So therefore, there's no evidence that making these changes would necessarily destroy or make those plans or alternative ideas or concepts not able to be produced. In the case of an amendment to the comprehensive plan of land uses that subject parcels being redesignated are physically suitable for the allowed land uses in the designated should be requested, including compatibility with existing plans surrounding land uses in the zoning district location criteria contained within the comprehensive plan and zoning code. Changing the comprehensive plan use designation to rural residential would bring the properties into greater compliance with the nearby residential zoned areas to the west, east, and south. There's also a school slated to be built adjacent to those properties within the city of Pasco boundaries. One of the countywide planning policies, housing, encourages the availability of affordable housing to all economic segments. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant's point that allowing residential development to occur could lead to the increase in affordable housing due to the general increase of available housing stock. The proposed amendment is consistent with the Growth Management Act and other applicable jurisdictional policies and agreements and/or other state or local laws. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that this was not an expansion of the Clark's Addition Lammerd, but the creation of a new Lammerd. Planning Commission also concurred with the applicant's conclusion that Franklin County is able to create new landmarks. Local areas more intense rural development. The amendment advances the public health, safety, or welfare and is in the best interest of the residents of Franklin County. Franklin County concurred with the applicant that the proposal would advance the housing countywide planning policy by allowing for more housing stocks, which over time would allow for more types of affordable housing types to become available. So that was for number one. Okay, so that was, those are the recommended findings of fact for 2022-01. During the findings of fact for CPA 2022-02, proposal is in accord with the goals, policies, comprehensive plan, including the countywide planning policies. One of the countywide planning policies, housing encourages the availability of affordable housing to all economic segments of the Franklin County. You're going to find that a lot of these repeat themselves because they're effectively the same rationale and reasoning. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to read every single one of these except for when they're different. The effect of the proposal on the immediate vicinity will not be material or detrimental to the land use that is the basis of the comprehensive plan or the zoning designation. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that the all tax designation of the property was not congruent with two nearby landmarks located to both the west and east sides of the property. Planning Commission agreed that change in the comprehensive plan use designation of rural shoreline development would provide great congruency between the two landmarks. Okay, the number three will not result in probable significant adverse effects to this transportation network. That is basically the same thing, is that, yeah, there's plans, there's concepts, there's maybes, but there's nothing concrete right now. So that changing the zoning would necessarily destroy those plans or anything like that. Those things can be amended to accommodate if necessary. In the case of an amendment to the comp plan land use map, that subject parcels being redesignated are physically suitable for the allowed land uses in this designation being requested, including compatibility with existing plans surrounding land uses in the zoning district location criteria contained within the comprehensive plan and zoning code. The Franklin County Comprehensive Plan lists as one of the policies in achieving the goal of maximum degree of compatibility between land uses, adjacent land uses, a policy of achieving the maximum degree of okay, we said that twice. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that change in the comprehensive plan land use designation to rural shoreline development will achieve the maximum degree of compatibility between adjacent land uses of rural shoreline development and neighboring rural remote. One of the countywide planning policies, the availability of affordable housing to all. It's the same reference on page 7 for the county population. Proposed amendment is consistent with the Growth Management Act and other applicable interjurisdictional policies and agreements and or other state or local laws. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that this was not an expansion of the Columbia River West Landmark, but the creation of a new landmark. Planning Commission also concurred with the applicant's argument that Franklin County is able to create new landmarks. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that all tax agricultural lands, long-term commercial significant designations are eligible to be withdrawn during the yearly comprehensive plan amendment process and not just during periodic comprehensive plan updates. The amendment advances the public health, safety, or welfare and is in the best interest of the residents of Franklin County. Planning Commission concurred with the applicant that the proposal would advance the housing countywide planning policy by allowing for more housing stock, which over time would allow for more types of affordable housing types to become available. Are there any questions?
Is there any discussion amongst the planning commission prior to entertaining a motion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a recommendation of approval for CPA 2022-01 with the 6 adopted findings of fact.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Vincent and seconded by Commissioner Knighton that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a recommendation of approval for CPA 2022-1 with the 6 adopted findings of facts. Is there any discussion? May we have a roll call vote?
Mike Corrales,
Yes.
Mike Vincent,
Yes.
Stacy Knightton,
Yes.
Peter Harpster.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion for CPA 2022-2.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a recommendation of approval for CPA 2022-02 with the 6 adopted findings of fact.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Vincent and seconded by Commissioner Knighton that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a recommendation of approval for CPA 2022-02 with the 6 adopted findings of fact. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, since I'm gonna have to abstain from voting on this, I'm involved with this project. So that's gonna leave us with a lack of a forum for this one.
You don't technically have to.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was quasi judicial. Never mind.
No, this is not quasi judicial. I'm sorry. This is not quasi judicial. This is a comprehensive plan amendment.
Okay.
So
Okay, disregard.
I appreciate it though.
Thank you.
So-
May we have a roll call vote,
Did we get a
please?
second on that? I apologize.
Yes.
Okay. Repeat, please.
Mike Corrales,
Yes.
Mike Vincent,
Yes.
Stacy Knightton,
Yes.
Peter Harpster.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have 4 minutes till this whole place blows up. Is there a member of the audience who wants to comment on the listed items not on the agenda? Update on previous items that went before the board.
Just real quick. We
3
have,
minutes.
we have on the agenda, I know, but you skipped a whole section of the
Well,
agenda.
let's get it done.
And that is the discussion and vote regarding change to the planning commission bylaws to start the meetings at 6 PM as asked by Chair
That's an important.
Corrales. We can't do it because we don't have enough members. We have to have
So
5.
we'll just do that same thing next meeting.
We'll move it to the next meeting. Yep. But that had to be on the record. So
And then BOCC updates.
voted no on the PUD. I don't know if I told you guys that one already. So that one got kiboshed at the board meeting, the 15% open space. They did not go with the planning commission recommendation.
Which was also staff's recommendation.
Well, with the water system.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I knew there was something else, and the water system has been approved to move forward. Everything else has gone to the board, has been approved except for the PUD.
Well, how about Plateau at,
That hasn't gone to the board, or wait, did it go?
hasn't
No,
not,
we're
hasn't
still,
gone.
we're still getting
Yeah, that's going, because you just submitted that for last week for us to confirm for signatures. That was just submitted, so that'll be going a couple weeks out. See, our lead time, we have to submit things to the board 11 days before the meeting is actually held. So that's a new shift and it sometimes, but yeah, that'll be going here soon. Within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I would say. Probably before Christmas. It'll be before Christmas, but after Thanksgiving, I want to say probably around the 18th or 21st, something like that. I've always got to do one just before I go before Christmas vacation.
What was wrong with the PUD with the board?
It was the area, wasn't it?
I think there was some confusion as to, one, the applicability, how it would be applied or could be applied. There were some questions that, like questions about applications in a Lammert or something like that. meaning like an RC1 or an RC5 Lambert. The reality is PUDs are all going to be applicable in the shoreline development area because those other areas, you can only, what, do two units. There's no point in doing a PUD for 2 units. You can only do PUDs, or the only rational place to do them is where you have large areas so that you can actually create a subdivision. Well, you can't create subdivisions. You can do short plats, but not long plats and Lamberts, what I call the blocks. So Basin City, Eltopia, maybe in Merrill's Corner, there's those Lamberts. Yeah, maybe you would do a PUD in those areas, but not out in, okay, Clark's Addition would in theory fly right, but the zoning isn't, those aren't right, but just, so anyways, I think there was confusion there. I'm not really quite sure. And then, I think, there was a lot of, project specific type questions. Well, if they do X, then Y would happen. Well, they're not asking to do X right now, and that's a discussion for X and Y. But this is, so it just, they frankly didn't explain why. If I remember right, it was due to a lack of a second on that
Yeah, it
one.
was.
Yeah. So we never got to discussion.
Not too bad.
So that's kind of where that's at. And yeah. That's about it for me though. I mean, we've got, we'll bring back the bylaws next week or next month. I just can't think off the top of my head what we, again, I would like you guys to look over the zoning code. And I'd like to spend a lot of next month's planning commission meeting, unless something pops up, I'm just not thinking.
Well, it'll be January.
Yes, we do. We have the zoning code. Unless you guys want to cancel, because it is December. That's up to you guys. But what he's saying is we don't have any applications. So
What day would the meeting be?
it'd be the first Tuesday.
Yeah, it's December 5th.
And that would be a good time to talk about the meeting time and Title 17. Being that there'd be no other project.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's a good reason, I think that that's what we should do. It'd be a work meeting, not having to worry about any applications. So let's plan on the 5th. Those are the things, of course, we'll send stuff out. We will send this electronically again, but we ain't sending hard copies, so don't get rid of your hard
It's
copies.
the same, this is what we're working on.
This is what we're working off. So what I need you guys to do is look these things over the next month, 3 weeks actually, because we're in the second week. Come back with questions. And then guess what you'll be doing between December and January? You'll be looking at this again, and I want you to bring back more questions. I want you guys to know this code.
Are you doing it a specific chunk at a time, or what are we looking at for the first meeting?
Part of the first meeting is you guys bring, and we'll see if you guys, we'll see. And then that will help inform us whether we're doing workshops, just conversations, discussions, things like that based on the questions. A lot of these things we may be able to answer in the meeting, but it's also possible you ain't going to get through this whole thing between now and the next meeting. This is at your pace to some degree, I mean, this is not like applications have statutory timelines and various other, this stuff doesn't. This has to be done right, not fast.
More of a reactive kind of situation.
It's,
Meeting.
this is, look, AHBL's been working on this since a long time.
Right.
I combed over it pretty extensively. We've got some other things, but there's some things and questions that I have that we will potentially address later, or new concepts or whatever, because we have to look at new paradigms. A lot of this work is just getting us up to, like I said, about 2018. But more stuff's come out in the last 5 years. So this will be continual. You guys have new ideas. You talk to folks. You find out that there's something we're not looking at. There's something we haven't even thought of. That's why we ask that you talk to the public on these things. Help us make this document the document it needs to be for Franklin County, not for me, not for the board, but for the residents. Think when you're doing it. Try to put yourself in these people's shoes. Is this helping? Is it clear? Are you confused? Technical terms are technical terms. They are what they are sometimes, but that's why, like Nicole said, pay attention to the definitions. Because the definitions control. So if there's a definition in here, it doesn't matter what everybody else understands that word to mean. It's what is adopted as the definition. So that's a key thing. You may see things that are missing. You may not agree with the definition. You may want explanation. At this point, we've kicked the ball. You have it. And now we will work together to get it across the goal line. Whether or not we do it in one run or a lot of little short drives, it needs to be based on your comfort with what's being proposed and comfort with knowing that the public has been adequately involved and that we're doing what's best for the residents of Franklin County. That's it for me.
Sounds good.
Okay. And our meeting did not blow up.
Doesn't look like it.
Is the problem fixed? Why didn't it blow up?
Let's not ask. I'll find
Oh,
out.
I'm asking, all right.
I'll bring you
Damn
that
right I'm
information
asking.
Next week, because no, they
Jeez.
were made aware of it earlier this week. They may have fixed it since then. They may have
Just the whole thing
the
stopped.
thing went to sleep.
Okay,
Was it,
good.
was it because the system was going to sleep?
There's a timing. We have a set time, it's at 11 o'clock at night, it's supposed to restart the system. The time comes off on the machine, so it's about 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We set it over there.
It
Well,
must
that's a
be,
good time.
it must be East Coast time.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That sounds like New York time to me. Thank you.
8:06, we're adjourned.